Hey everyone, Wendler here, and in this video we're going to talk about Valorant's rank system and why it still needs some changes yet to improve on the player experience. For starters, this is not a video intended to blast the Valorant developers or state I'm in a rank I shouldn't be in or I'm in elo hell and here's why, let's blame the ranking system. It's more so to look at the data behind the ranked gains and losses and why the system overall needs to be adjusted to better represent this game at its core, which is a team-based tactical FPS. It's just very hard to put performance as a factor in ranked, which is up to Immortal now after the changes to this act, when team roles are so important. The argument would be different if an individual agent could equally play an entry or a team frag or a support role, but we all know the ability for a Jett, Reyna, or Raze to enter or entry frag is significantly higher than that of a Brimstone, Sage, or Omen. It's also obvious that these characters have a higher chance to naturally frag, so why should the system put an additional weight on that accordingly? A Sage and Brimstone shouldn't get a +1 for going 14, 10, and 13 in a win while doing their support jobs, while the Reyna or Raze gets a +2 or +3 for going 25, 10, and 5 off the benefit of what Brim and Sage was doing for them. The Sage and Brim had just as much of an impact for the team ending result. It just doesn't make sense that the ranking system is rated this way. So the first step here is to look at the data to discuss the main issues with the current system. The data on this screen here is my most recent games from ranked. The total is 50 matches. I could have had more, but I'm just not sure of the plus-minus gain due to Blitz not reporting it. I essentially just went down the list, recorded each game, and the stats accordingly. The main reason for this, as I mentioned before, is when you put players into roles like support or control or duelist, you start to blur the lines to what statistics are good between things like damage per round, kills per round, etc. And without even looking at the stats, like it's easy to think like, of course, the Reyna would outfrag the Brimstone. It's further an issue when the system doesn't accurately portray wins and losses consistently based on performance. It seems the system gets the extreme or outliers correct, but not the consistency or the play on average between them. As a baseline, since we're using performance, any game that has a 0.8 kill per round or more is highlighted green. As statistically, these are games where I've had a high impact. 15 of 29 of these games, so there's 29 total games highlighted green out of 50. 15 of them are entry characters or duelist, Raze, Jett, Reyna. 22 of them is including Silva, which you can argue as an initiator he can be an entry character, and only 7 of 29 of them do not include an initiator or a duelist. And I can guarantee that this theme is consistent across the board. The one major question I have when looking at this data on the screen is some games have 2-round differences that determine if it's a +2 or a +3 or a +1 or a +2. But some stats are greater in these differences, so I'm confused at where performance is playing a role in this ranking. Some examples of this are I have a 13-5 game as Raze, where I go 14, 11, and 6. I drop a 0.8 kill per round, which is solid. I do 167 damage per round, and it equates to a 3-up. But I have a 13-8 game as Raze in the +2 section where I have a better KDA, I have better kills per round, I have better damage per round, and because it was 3 rounds later, it's equivalent to only a 2-up. Or I have this 13-6 game where I go 18, 13, and 2 as Reyna. I have better kills per round again. I have around the same significant damage per round, and it's also equal to only a 2-up. And there's a lot of games like this that are kind of represented in a similar fashion where I have better kills per round, better damage per round, but it's a 2-up instead of a 3, and it just doesn't make sense. Why were these games not on the same level? The same issue can be said for the loss section here on the right side. I have a 12-14 overtime loss here on Omen where I go 30, 17, and 3. I have 1.2 kills per round, 141 damage per round on average. So this is equivalent to a 2 down, right? But if we go over to no gain, I have a complete tie registered, 14-14. My kill death assist was 14, 22, and 13. I had near no impact this game per round. My damage per round is okay. And it equated to not a gain nor a loss. How is this overtime game weighted a worse loss than this no gain tie overtime game? The same thing can be said about if we look at the -1 section. So I have an 11-13 loss here as Jet. I go 16, 19, and 4. I drop 0.7 kills per round, so I'm doing on average what I should be doing. My damage per round is a little low with 116, and this equaled a 1 down, or 1 down arrow. How is this game in overtime, which you would argue is a closer match, higher game in terms of significance, where I had way more of an impact, 2 down, but this game where we just straight up lose, it doesn't even hit overtime, I had less of an impact, I had less kills per round, only a 1 down arrow loss. It just doesn't make sense to me. And the theme here is consistent across the board. Even if we compare this 11-13 loss, right, to this 13-15 overtime loss down here, where I have 0.9 kills per round, I have better damage per round, I go 24, 21, and 3, I go positive, and again, it's another overtime game where we go into the second overtime phase. Why is this a -2? I don't understand. So here's another quick example of 3 losses from September that are all 10-13, and this one I tweeted out, so this is a little bit separated from my usual data pile I have here in Excel. So again, these are all 10-13 losses. I have this Cypher game where I go 12, 18, and 6 with a 0.5 kill per round, 112 damage per round. This resulted in a no gain. This was an all gold lobby. Everyone in this lobby were gold players. It was everyone within the same rank. These other 2 games, one is a raise where I go 16, 18, and 6, 0.7 kills per round, so I'm doing what I should be doing on average, 157 damage per round, team MVP, in a gold and plat lobby. Somehow this equates to a 1 down arrow. Or if you go to this other game as Sova, the score was 17, 18, and 6. My scoreline was, again, the same average kills per round, 0.7, are roughly the same damage per round, 148, and this equated to a D rank in the same lobby where it was gold, plat, and I believe this consisted of 1 diamond player on each team. So I get D ranked from this, which roughly is 1 to 2 down arrows depending how you look at it. How is the game where I drastically underperformed in my own rank equated to a no gain or loss, but the 2 games I played where I'm in a higher overall elo lobby contribute to a 1 down arrow or a 1 to 2 down arrow depending on how big the D rank was? If performance was a consistent factor in ranked results, and mainly the Cypher versus the Raze and Sova game, these 2 results should be flipped. The Raze and Sova game should have resulted in a no gain or no loss since they were losses. And the Cypher game should have been a 1 and possibly 2 down arrow loss, or a 10-13 where I had that little of an impact. There's nothing I did there. The ranking system just is not consistent at all. So here are my opinions on how to fix and improve it after looking at this data. So my fix number 1 is iron rank to silver rank should still be a performance and score mix. The reason for this is it still protects new players while allowing players who start to gain in skill level or improve to start their climb out, and they can faster climb out into the general ranks with everyone else. A majority of players will eventually end up in gold and plat statistically anyway, so I don't have an issue keeping this rank or these ranks separated in terms of how they're viewed. In the future, I wouldn't really have an issue either with all ranks being climbed based on final scores and their significance, but I do think that there is an argument to be made about the lower ranks still containing performance versus the rank mostly everyone is in. Second point to tie with that is gold forward up to radiant, obviously, would be based on the final score and the significance of the score. Example being like 13-10 versus a 13-4 win. What this would do is it places a greater importance on these ranks and it increases the depth on the ranked grind. Ranks actually feel more valuable because of this, and ranked would improve to be a better team-focused experience versus a more solo-oriented one to attempt to climb easier with good games or salvage bad ones. My third option or third idea in association with these other 2 is that Valorant needs to add a 4th sub-rank to increase the depth of the grind. And what I mean by sub-rank is not like an additional rank with gold and plat, but more so like gold 4, plat 4, diamond 4, etc. What this would help do is establish a more true rank for players over time. In addition to making wins and losses matter, it would help take away some RNG aspects from players climbing ranks way too fast and gaining in games that they otherwise shouldn't. If you look at my data example here, there's some games in this data set where I probably shouldn't had a +3, like this Raze game I mentioned earlier, But sometimes you can get lucky and get 2 to 3 games in a row where you get into a game like this where you blow out a game, you don't really do too crazy, you kind of go even, and it equates to a +3. And so you end up with players climbing ranks that shouldn't probably be in those ranks. And when you increase the depth of the grind, it helps take away some of that RNG out of the mix, and it rewards more consistency compared to luck. And it would also make gaining plat, diamond, or immortal way higher valued, and it would also take away some necessity for smurf accounts in certain cases. Smurf accounts would still exist as players eventually would cap out, but the grind would be more valuable to hit a goal point versus now where it's like, well, you've kind of just easily blown through these 3 ranks, you don't care to grind up any further than that because you feel like you're being slighted, so you make a smurf and you do it over again. The fourth point is all players gain and lose the same MMR when they're in gold ranks or above. And so in association with the win and loss change, players of course would then gain and lose the same as their teammate counterparts. What this would help do is take solo mentality out of the game experience and promote more teammate coordination. There's no more salvaging or relentless toxicity because their game was saved due to their own performance, or trying to just ignore team play altogether and attempting to save it by just solo fragging their way out. A common issue you have, especially around gold, I would say it's a bigger problem in probably smaller ranks than it is gold forward, but there is an extent where a player will be top fragging, the game isn't going as well as it should, and they kind of throw the game away because they know in their heads that their rank is probably fine, but their teammates aren't, so they make that experience worse for everyone, and you can report them. But what this would do is kind of take that incentive, which can be argued as an incentive for these players in a way, completely out of the mix. You gain as a team, you lose as a team. And I think that would help some toxicity at all levels. And it would also force more team play because it's no longer about, hey, I'm going to do what I want because I'll at least salvage this, what could be 3 down arrows into a 1 down arrow, or it could salvage this 2 up arrow game into a 3 up arrow game if I just solo frag. And it would force more team communication and team play in general. And this, in combination with my last major point, that total MMR loss should be equal to half the MMR gain from the winning team, would kind of push these toxicity ideas out of the mix. So what this final idea offers is this would stunt losses from overall feeling like bad losses or underdeserving ones. For the sake of example, since we don't see numbers of what we gain and lose in Valorant, let's say a team's max gain they could gain is 4 up arrows. If a team were to win with that gain, the max amount of loss players from the other team would see is 2 down arrows. Or if a team were to gain 3 up arrows, the max loss for the other team would be 1 down arrow. The reason this is important is if you end up in a lobby, like, because there's some times where players of higher ranked end up in a lobby of lower MMR players. This would make a bad loss seem not as bad or as dramatic as it could be, and it would help kind of fine-tune the climbing experience to be more consistent, especially with adding depth of adding a 4th sub-rank. Bad losses wouldn't feel like I've been slighted, wins still feel equally important, and it would help adjust the ladder accordingly. All of these changes together, I feel, would add a greater team focus to the game, and it would remove solo selfish mindsets and overall improve the rank system across the board for solo and duo queue players, along with players queuing with teams. Teams or 5 stacks would still naturally win and lose and climb and fall accordingly. It's not going to create any unfair boosts or anything of the sort because of these changes. In general, just to see a Sage, Breach, Silver, or Omen as a lesser value due to the frag potential just seems really odd. It's just hard to factor performance consistently because of this, especially at a pub level with just standard ranked matches. I think with these changes to the rank system, it would take it from a frustrating experience to a more enjoyable one, especially with filling out your Dorito or just trying to play ranked with friends. Thank you guys for watching. Feel free to hit the subscribe button. I do stream on Twitch. I do tweet every day if you'd like to see when I go live. But I hope this feedback or insight was valuable, and make sure to share the video too if you did enjoy it. Hope you guys have a good rest of your day when they're out.
Good start.
Attackers win.